All right, so page 44, we agnostics. I always ask this before we get started just to see where people are at. Is there any agnostics in the room? Or any atheists in the room? Okay.
I don't claim anything.
Don't claim anything.
Anything.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not a believer. I'm not a non-believer. I'm not.
But you don't want to be called agnostic. Okay.
I have faith. And
We're going to pray extra hard for you. Seriously?
Okay.
No, seriously. Yep. All right. So we agnostics. Let's start out with the definition. What's agnostic? So relate, and you can write this definition right below that. And if anybody needs pens and highlighters, that's what we do. We go through the book and we highlight and we write down definitions. So agnostic is, let's do atheist first. Atheist will flat out deny the existence of God. So that's an atheist. They deny the existence of God, and usually they'll tell you why. So flat out denies the existence of God is an atheist. An agnostic, relating with God, is unknown and probably unknowable, is agnostic, unsure. Relating with God is unknown and probably unknowable. It's going to be hard for you not to talk, I know it. Save it.
Unknown and what?
Probably unknowable. But this is the good part for new people, especially agnostics. The Latin is kind of cool. Ag means without, and Gnostic means knowledge. So agnostic in the Latin literally means without knowledge. We read the spiritual experience about without knowledge, if you guys remember that, but it goes hand in hand if you read that again. And we read in the forewords of the first 100 alcoholics, half of them were agnostic or atheist. So, I mean, that's the good news about AA. Just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you're not welcome. I mean, I know so many people that find their relationship with Christ in AA going through the steps. I had a belief, I didn't have a relationship. I went through the steps and started helping others. I found a relationship. That's what happened in my experience. But amazing things happen when we have faith, that word that has already been used. So, in the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. Man, I hope so. we went through a lot. We hope we have made the clear distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. I have this highlighted. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So again, going through that many pages, hopefully we realize we can't do this alone. And in order for that obsession to be removed, we read it, we have to have God's help. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, notice the terminology, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic. Do you remember what we said about our feelings?
Yeah.
You guys remember what we said about our feelings? Just because I feel something, yes, we said F your feelings, but just because I feel something doesn't necessarily make it true. Most of the time it's not. Such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed, I have this highlighted. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. And I have page 25 written there. Because if you go to page 25, the last paragraph, and again, I told you this book, like the Bible, there's affirmations in it that we're going to read something that we already read. So write page 25 next to that, and then on the bottom of 25 it says, if you are seriously alcoholic as we were, there is no middle of the road solution. You were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation, and the other is to accept spiritual help. So when we read that again, no gray area. Next sentence on 44. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were exactly of that type. So again, that's for hope. Of the first 100 alcoholics, half of them were atheists or agnostics, and they all came to believe. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. I have this highlighted. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. And disconcerted is to disturb or to upset. Disconcerted. To disturb or to upset. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we have found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. All right, I would start highlighting here. And I have it highlighted all the way until, and it means, of course, we are going to talk about God. On the top of this page, I have written in huge letters what this book is about. I know guys decades in Alcoholics Anonymous that don't know what this book is about. It's going to tell us our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. What's the problem again? It's not the alcohol or the drugs. I need to find how I can live sober. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, italicized words. Obviously, but where and how are we going to find this power? That's exactly what this book is all about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means that we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral, and it means, of course, we are going to talk about God. So anybody that says that God isn't a part of the program, and you'll meet them, they're in every meeting. This is saying exactly what this book is all about, and that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship, but his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. It works both ways. I came in believing in God, and when I found out the solution was God, my face fell because I could not stop thinking about drinking, and I could not stop drinking. So Your face can fall if you don't believe in God. Your face can fall when you already do believe in God. So don't let either one deter you. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. And that's what you find a lot. You find people had a very bad representation of Jesus growing up. Something bad happened to them. And, most, I'm not going to say not all, it's not that they don't believe. A lot of us are mad at God. Or a lot of us were raised, like I said, harm was caused by people who said they were godlike people. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We look upon this world of warring individuals, and warring means in conflict, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity. Calamity, distress, or disaster. Did anybody have a lot of calamity in their life when they came in? Disaster or distress. With deep skepticism, we looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. So that's what I just mentioned. Askance is distrust. Distrust is askance. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet in other moments we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. And remember, as we're reading, this is made for the agnostic. It's not made for the believer. So the words we're reading is for the agnostic. I have the rest of this paragraph highlighted. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express, and circle this word as you're highlighting, a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we could commence to get results. That is a promise. Even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So are they asking for a full belief right here? All they're asking is a willingness to believe. That's all they're asking for. So, when you're working, you may be working with someone that's an atheist or an agnostic, and if they get to this point, you're not asking them to believe right then and there. Are you willing to believe? And we've already read in spiritual experience, what 3 things do we have to have? This is one of them. Willingness, honesty, and an open mind. Have to have those. So if you're working with someone that's not willing, it's hard to go forward with them. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, and I would underline that. We have to be willing to believe in the conception of God, and it's telling us right there that our conception is probably inadequate. What's conception? Idea. It's an idea. And we look that word up many times in step 1. What's idea? Imagined in the mind. It's a part of our false reality. It's a part of alcoholism. So even though I'm willing to believe in a concept of God, that concept may not necessarily be true. For a lot of people, it's not true. If you're willing to change and find out who God is, and that takes going through the steps, especially in step 11. But just know that concept, just because, well, I don't believe in your God, I'm going to believe in this one that makes me feel good, don't necessarily think that that's true. But the concept is good enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like I was thinking about, I was talking about that a couple weeks ago to someone, and I was like, one of the main problems I had was like, you choose your own God, and I'm like, but I'm drunk, I'm a drunk. Like, why choosing who am I to say who God is?
Right.
But yeah, I always thought that was wrong. I don't know.
Well, the good news is for an atheist or an agnostic who this chapter is for, if they can get that concept, it helps them to go forward. At this point, most of them are probably still angry or still in unbelief, but having a concept of God can help them to keep moving forward. And as they keep moving forward, hopefully they find that relationship with the one true God. But just know, as we're going through, what that concept means. You hear it all the time in meetings. It's a concept. It's about a concept. That's fine, but that concept isn't necessarily true. In fact, it's an idea that's a part of alcoholism. But it's sufficient at this point. It's sufficient. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, spirit of the universe, so capitalized letters there, and there are other terms. If you're working with someone that doesn't like the word Jesus, the word God, the authors of this book are giving them other terms to define that power that they're willing to believe in. Creative intelligence, spirit of the universe, to keep them moving forward. Underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. That's a promise. We found that God does not make too hard of terms with those who seek him. That's a powerful sentence. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive, or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. Also have this pondering, in the back of your head. The realm of the Spirit. Is that 100% good? A lot of people in recovery come in and, I'm spiritual, and they think everything spiritual is good. Is that reality? And there's a lot of negative spirituality, demonic spirits. They're real. They are absolutely real. So again, what's alcohol called? Spirits. So as we're going through this, the realm of the Spirit, here's a very positive thing. But just know that there is a very negative spirituality as well. This next page, I have the whole thing just bracketed. So this step 2 is going to start on this page. And there's 2 parts of step 2. And it's pretty amazing the difference between the 2. When therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, have this highlighted, this is all you needed to commence spiritual growth. Again, just a willingness to start, that there is something out there that's bigger than me. To effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him. Afterwards, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. Highlight that. That is a promise. And it's very important. You notice how they didn't use another spiritual term. They used God. And they're saying all we have to do is have that, just willingness to believe in him, and that's all I need to move forward. That was growth, but if we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. So again, it's describing that word conception. It's limited. But the good news is, and I have it written right here, however limited, it's good enough to keep moving forward. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. So right here, you want to write step 2. This is the first part. As you're guiding someone through the book, this is where step 2 is. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? Show of hands, is anybody there? Does anybody believe or is willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? Okay. That's the first part. And you want, when you're we're doing this as a workshop for us, but you also want to put it when you're helping someone else. So you ask them right then and there, are you willing to believe? We emphatically assure him that he is on his way as soon as they're willing to believe. That is a promise. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. What's after that sentence?
Asterisk.
Is that another asterisk?
That's a spiritual experience.
So how many times, what are we up to now?
That's 3.
Is this 3?
2.
This is 3.
Yeah.
So write third time, right next to that. Bring the asterisk down to the bottom of the page, and what does it say? Please be sure to read Appendix 2 on spiritual experience. We won't read it. Usually I do, but read it on your own for the third time. But just remind us, it's just to remind you, what did it say before that in the pages we already read? So on 25, the asterisk said fully explained Appendix 2. On 27, it said for amplification, see Appendix 2. Now what does it say? Please be sure to read. Do you think they know who they're dealing with? They're dealing with alcoholics that would look at that asterisk and not read it. So they have it there 3 times to read it.
And still people don't look at it.
And the spiritual experience, all is it about is change. They use that word 10 times. And that's where they say you need to be willing, honest, with an open mind. Have to be. And then it talks about the fundamental idea of God is in us. It's in each and every one of us. We just got to tap it. So just, connect those asterisks when you see them. And that's a promise. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes, but I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, which is being stubborn. Are we stubborn?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
I sit on this.
Sensitiveness and unreasoning prejudice. I was talking about this the other day. Being sensitive for normal people is a good thing, right? For us, is it a good thing? It's a handicap for us. Being oversensitive, we tend to take a lot of things personal. So for the alcoholic, that being sensitive thing is, if we're in untreated it can be a good thing, but if we're in untreated alcoholism, it can be a very, very negative thing.
Are you talking about emotionally sensitive?
Yes. But also being oversensitive, it can be anger, it can be oversensitive to fear, it can be, I can watch 2 people talk to themselves and all of a sudden my mind goes to they must be talking about me. And then I form a resentment being oversensitive and has nothing to do with me. That's what my mind does. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things make us bristle with antagonism. Bristle, aggressive,
Anger. Aggressive anger.
Yep. Aggressive anger is bristle. And antagonism is opposition or hostility. Bristle, aggressive anger. Antagonism, opposition, hostility. I wish I could tell you those things went away, but they don't. But we get a way of dealing with them and knowing what to do with them. And then what does the next sentence say? This sort of thinking has to be abandoned. We're going to read what resentment does to us. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. And I would highlight the next two sentences. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Usually that's what happens. I was always a believer, but I see people come in and they did not want to be willing. So they go in and out, try it again, in and out, try it again. And then they get beat to a point where they finally realize they can't do it on their own. They have to have some sort of willingness in God. And the authors share that over and over again. So if you survive it and you make it back, thank God. But, just know, if you have alcoholism, what we described over these past few months, you can't do this without God. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced as long as some of us were. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We think there are good reasons. Let us have a look at them. Now remember, this is 1930s language. They're trying to explain it the best they could during that time. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of a doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions of which there's good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at an incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence. All words for higher power, God. Right there, our perverse streak comes to the surface. Perverse means stubborn or oppose. Stubborn or oppose. Comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. Laboriously, requiring great effort. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? I like what they did there. I like, it is 1930s, about the steel girder and all that, but I mean, they're just trying to say we can go at great lengths to say science says this is so, but we go to even greater lengths to say why there is no God. And how many times is science not right? I have this whole last paragraph bracketed. We who have traveled this dubious path, dubious is uncertain, we beg of you to lay aside prejudice even against organized religion. So yeah, they tell you this is not a religious program, and it's not. But do they tell you to bash religion? They're telling me to lay aside prejudice against religion. We have learned that whatever those human frailties of various faiths may be, this is huge, highlight this, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices, highlight the rest of this, when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. Instead, we look at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. Wholesale we looked up before, but it's large quantities. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. I love this part. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest, because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In other words, this Christian harmed me in a certain way, caused a lot of distress in my life, so that means all Christians are bad. That's what they're saying. And us alcoholics can do that. We can look at one thing that this one person did to us and bash the entire religion, the entire faith. We can do that with AA. Well, that meeting sucked. All of Alcoholics Anonymous must be bad. I did it all the time.
The contempt without investigation.
That's it. And spiritual experience that we have to read 3 times tells us that's it. Yep.
Do I need to sit closer to the door?
Nah.
Okay. That's okay.
Or you can sing, no?
Way to go there.
In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference, and I would highlight the rest of this. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. You need to find your personal relationship with God. That's the good news. It's not about another person's. Other persons may guide you and help you, but does Christ want someone to be forced upon him? Not at all. It's your choice. We all get that choice. We all got the blessing of free will. On one proposition, however, and actually right next to himself, I have the freedom. That's the freedom of this program. You don't have that many those kinds of freedoms, anywhere else. I met this person, my sponsor's sponsor, and he said, AA is the only place that you can stand up, hold hands, with a Muslim, a Jehovah's Witness, an atheist, an agnostic, and a Christian and say the Lord's Prayer? Where else can you do that? I'll never forget he said that. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. So every one of the first 100 alcoholics, half of them were atheists or agnostic. They get to this point, they're all agreed in a power greater than himself, and that this power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. This is where I have the definition of miracle. And you can write the definition on the bottom of this page. Divine intervention in human affairs. Divine intervention in human affairs. Has anybody seen a miracle today? Yeah? More than one? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 right now.
Divine intervention in what?
Human affairs. There are 12 miracles in this room. You got to remember, and I'll always remind you of this, most people that are real alcoholics and have alcoholism, most of them die. Everybody in this room is today recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, or else you wouldn't be here. That's a miracle, and there's 12 of them in here. You can see miracles every single day, and you start by looking in the mirror. All right, here are thousands. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. So this is a quote from Governor Alfred Smith. If you want to research him, go ahead. I haven't. I just know this is a quote by Alfred Smith. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. What's my problem again? My living and my thinking. That's the crux of my problem. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. These are all promises, by the way. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused, baffled by the seeming futility of existence, futility is useless. Did anybody feel that their existence was useless? Boy, I did. They show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. And is it amazing that that useless existence we used to think about turns into the very asset that helps other people? Pretty amazing. Leaving aside the drink question, here we go. This is what kept me in and out for years. I always thought the booze was the problem. So it's saying, leaving aside the drugs and the alcohol, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them when many hundreds of people are able to say, this is all highlighted, that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. These are the people that came before us, the first 100 alcoholics. Half of them were atheists and agnostics, and look what they're saying. So you can call those the second step promises, but those are, starting on the bottom of 50 to the top of 51, those are all promises that happen. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than all the millenniums went before. Remember, 1939. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Fettered is controlled. Controlled. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We asked ourselves this, and I would highlight this. Again, this is for the agnostic and the atheist. Are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Science proved that man could never fly. Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and an airplane travel was in full swing. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Did they do it? Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? All right. Yeah. So when I came in and my sponsor said, whenever you feel anger, whenever you feel useless, whenever you feel stress or anxious or depressed, go to page 52.
Yeah, I wrote that on the top. It says, go to this page when problems.
A lot of times, especially early on, you're going through something that you can't even identify. There's something off. There's something wrong with me, whether it be anxiety, but there's something not right. So my sponsor always told me, go to 52, and they're going to explain what's not right. So label this next paragraph the bedevilments. You can put that on the top of this page. I have it labeled the 9 areas of unmanageability.
I got that, and I also put temperament gauge.
Yep. Temperament gauge, where I'm at today. But 9 areas of unmanageability. I also have in big letters self. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. Here we go. Were we having trouble with 1, personal relationships? 2, we couldn't control our emotional natures. 3, we were prey to misery. And 4, depression. We couldn't make a living is 5. Number 6, we had a feeling of uselessness. 7, full of fear. 8, unhappy. And 9, we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. The definition of bedevilment, you can write this on the side. To torment, to worry, to harass. To torment. That first one really stands out. To worry, to harass. Can we do that with our thoughts? And a lot of times, if you couldn't identify what was wrong and you go to this page, almost every time it's more than one of those 9 things that you're going through. And then you start backtracking and think about what you didn't do. Did you pray to God today? Did you read the big book today? Did you go to a meeting today? Did you try to help others today? So if you're going through any of that, backtrack where you're at in that day and find out what you haven't done. But this page never stops. You know, whether you're a day, whether you're 50 years, if there's something off, I was always told, go to this page. It'll tell you what's off. And every time I do, it's never just one of these things. Defects create defects. So highlight that whole thing, label it, get ready to show it to a lot of newcomers. And it provides hope for a lot of newcomers too, because you've gone through it. Alcoholics go through it. And it's almost worse when you can't identify what's going on. That's what anxiety did to me. There's something wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. I'm going insane. But when I look at these things, I can start identifying what's wrong with me. And that anxiety is just fear. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the Spirit of the universe, highlight all this, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could bring a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. Right here, I do have the definition of faith. So they're talking the Wright brothers' childish faith. This is a good place to write the definition for faith. It's kind of a long one, so I'll read it several times. The substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. The substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. I always like to use the resurrection as an example of this. There's a lot of people that hope, that have faith that it's real, that he died for us and rose again to give us eternal life. Is there evidence for that? There is. But if you don't know it, you got to seek it. But that's faith. We didn't see it. We weren't there. But where's our faith in it today? I'm just using an example. But a lot of people hope for that don't know him, but there is evidence for that, even though you haven't seen it. That's what faith is. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe. Why we say to our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, this is the greatest question you can ever ask. We don't know. It's okay to not know. You can still move forward not knowing. If you still don't know today, it's okay as long as you keep seeking. And as I said, step 11 tells us to keep seeking. That doesn't stop. I know guys 40 years in the program that have stopped seeking. and they are miserable. You can tell they are miserable. You know, a lot of people will come to believe that concept sounds great. It feels good. I don't know who God is, but I'm going to make up my own one just because it feels good. And they stay stuck like that. I see it all the time. Don't stay stuck. Don't stay in complacency. Seek, seek, seek. So we don't know. You don't say you don't want to stay stuck there, but it's the greatest thing you can ask, because then hopefully it'll kick you in your butt and make you seek. I would highlight this whole next small paragraph. This is the second part of step 2, and it's written very differently than the first part. So the first part said what? First part was on 47. It says, do I now believe, or am I willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? Here's the second part of step 2. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. Here it is. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
He is.
So it's different than the first time they said it, isn't it? I mean, the first time they said it, are you willing to believe that a power greater than themselves? Now what are these authors saying? And remember, half of them were atheists and agnostics. And they're telling the reader, God either is or he isn't. There's no gray area. And that's how you want to ask your sponsee, who you're working with. You ask him, God is or he isn't. Where are you at?
I find it really difficult sometimes to tell people this, because I don't want people to think that I'm trying to act better than them.
No.
Because I'm not.
No.
You know,
And that's when
here.
And that's when you tell them, it's not me. He did it. He removed the obsession. It had nothing to do with me. But for this alcoholism, for you to be recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, you got to have willingness to believe in God. That's what they're trying to get. That's a clear point. Hopefully everyone sees that. There's no gray area in this second part of step 2. If you see gray area, let me know. I see God is or he isn't. That's what I see. And then it says, arrived at this point, and then I wrote, if you're not there, you got to go back. You know, if you're working with someone and they're just not there, they refuse to be there, you know, it's hard to move forward. If the willingness is there, move forward. But if there's zero willingness at this point, in my experience, they got more drinking to do. That's just my experience. Not my opinion. I see it. So arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason. Notice how reason is capitalized. Bridge of reason is capitalized. Toward the desired shore of faith. Faith is not capitalized. Watch what the authors start doing here as we're reading. So this is, just think about it, this is agnostic and atheist. Highlight this. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster and tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. And flagging spirits is becoming weaker, getting weaker, declining. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. AA seems reasonable. God seems reasonable. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason. You see how many times reason is capitalized in the middle of the sentence? What? I'll keep going. That last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. That was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful, and abjectly. This is a great definition. I would read this word and go right by it not knowing what it meant. And it makes this sentence. Abjectly is very low in spirit or hope. Very low in spirit or hope. Very low in spirit or hope. So abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, and I have this highlighted, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. We found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? That stuff happens right at the start of Adam and Eve and still goes to today, okay? And then, with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or the flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Reason is no longer capitalized, is it? Little or nothing we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. Highlight this. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. So, yes, I didn't get that for years. So reason is capitalized because it's a older, higher power. An agnostic or an atheist thinks of it a God of reason, not the God of faith. Pretty cool how they did that. Now they're really going to get into faith. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you could prove a straight line in the shortest distance is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it is. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on a destiny to nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that. At least so the chemist said. Hence we saw, I have this highlighted, that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate means to come forth, from our best minds. What about people who prove that man could never fly? I have this whole next paragraph bracketed, highlighted. Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. I wrote self right next to that. A lot of agnostics and atheists, they see something miraculous. They see something or live through something that only God could explain, but they like to tell themselves, it wasn't God. Right? And then it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves. I would highlight this. We read this in the spiritual experience 3 times. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Period. It may be obscure by calamity. We read that word, right? By pomp, which is splendor. Here's the big one. By worship of other things. We can worship anything but God. But in some form or other, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. I have this highlighted. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. So again, if you don't know God, search fearlessly. He was as much a fact as we were. We found, two capitalized words, the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. I have this next paragraph bracketed and highlighted. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. And broad highway is capitalized. It's open. The entrance to AA is not narrow, it's open. It's broad highway. And then it says, with this attitude, you cannot fail. That's a promise. The conscience of your belief is sure to come to you. Another promise. In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. So on the top of 56, I have the story of an atheist, and his full story is in the back of the book, and you can write page 208.
Southern friend.
Our southern friend. So page 208, story of an atheist, our southern friend. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, these calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." What does that sound like? If there's a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. What's our condition? We haven't read it yet, but what's one of the main parts of our condition? Selfishness. He hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Italicized words. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. This guy was an atheist. Now he's on his knees. And all he did was ask himself, who are you to say that there is no God? That's seeking. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. Cornerstone. No later vicissitude has shaken it. Vicissitude. Irregular, unexpected, surprising change. Irregular, unexpected, surprising change is vicissitude. How many times was the word change used in spiritual experience? 10 times. And it's a page and a half. Irregular, unexpected, surprising change. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. For a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. And revulsion is a sudden reaction or a change. A sudden reaction or a change. Revulsion. Again, and I can't stress this enough, we do not want to stay in complacency while we're in recovery.
What was revulsion again?
Sudden reaction or change. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God has restored his sanity. That is a promise. What is step 2? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Is anybody insane today?
Not right now.
Has anybody been restored to sanity when they never thought that would possibly happen, ever?
Yep.
In moments. Yeah. We can have our moments, for sure. But is sanity restored when I take action to do something?
Yes.
Yeah. And the key is taking action to do something.
Faith without works is dead.
There you go. Yep. Faith without works is dead. In this chapter. You can highlight the rest of this. What is this but a miracle of healing, yet its elements are simple? And all it took for this atheist to do was to ask himself, who am I to say there is no God? Circumstances made him willing to believe. What usually makes us willing to believe? Pain and suffering. That's usually the ultimate factor. So that those circumstances, that's what it's not there, but usually it's pain and suffering that make us willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his Maker, then he knew. That's a promise. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, and again, that's what the spiritual experience is about. Most of us don't have that burning bush type spiritual awakening. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. That is a promise. I cannot emphasize that promise. Jesus will not close his arms to anyone who seeks him. Here's another promise. They end this chapter with the promise. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. Promise. And that is the end of step 2. Next week we will start 3 and get into 4 on page 58. We have 15 minutes.